Welcome to our informational session of the Reston Design Review Board. We're going to start this evening. If everyone has one of these things in front of you, if you want to turn it on so it says green, not red, that way we can actually hear you. Just push the little button on it. And once you turn green, there you go. So this is a pre-meeting to our regular meeting. This is an informational only presentation by a whole bunch of lovely people I've worked with to produce this tomb over here. And I'll just let you guys go ahead. The floor is yours. Just introduce yourself.
Okay, great. Thank you. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yeah. I think so.
So I am Lauren Murphy. I'm the Reston Program Manager for the Fairfax County Office of Community Revitalization. I have with me Barbara Byron, who is the director of that office, Chris Caperton, the deputy director, and Beth Elliott, also all with the same office. So thank you for having us here. As Mr. Newland mentioned, we're here to just go over the draft guidelines for development in Reston transit station areas that our office has been working on developing with help from many, many others for about the last 2 years or so. So just a quick overview, we're talking about guidelines for development in the 3 Reston transit station areas, Wheelie Reston, Reston Town Center, and Herndon transit station areas. Basically everything you see on your screen in the blue and orange, everything inside the white lines. We have had a few questions about whether or not this would apply outside of the TSAs, and the answer to that is no. We're talking only about the orange and blue areas. A little bit of background, the county has actually had urban design guidelines since about the 1990s, and we have them for several of the commercial revite districts and areas. Annandale, Bailey's Crossroads is currently under development. And we have them in Tyson's. They were created with the adoption of the Tyson's plan and then updated most recently in 2016, so you may be familiar with those as well. We also have them in several specialty areas of the county, including the historic districts, but also special properties such as Thornton. Were all developed with urban design guidelines or design guidelines that are unique to those particular properties. The point here is that the Reston Comp Plan in particular adopted in 2014 and then provided a lot of high-level overarching guidance in terms of what the urban design vision for the Reston transit station areas would be. This document is meant to drill down a little further into how to implement those urban design principles that are contained in the plan. They're meant to encourage flexibility and innovation as opposed to prescribing a particular standard or style. So when we get a little further into the presentation, we've provided some screenshots of the guidelines for you. I know it's a large document, but hopefully you've had a chance to check it out online and flip through it a little bit. If not, hopefully read the whole thing. And you'll see that it's a lot of graphics and imagery and illustration that are all meant to kind of go along with these design strategies that we've created. Excuse me. I think I might be about to inherit a cold here, so bear with me if my voice gives out a little bit. Just to kind of go over things very high level, we've been receiving a few questions here and there, and they've all sort of dived down into guidelines are intended to or are not intended to. So just to kind of overview the purpose of these, they really are intended to, as I mentioned, enhance the goals of the comp plan and encourage flexibility and creativity in the Reston transit station areas as they develop along the corridor. They are meant to aid developers and staff during the redevelopment process within the Reston TSAs. They are meant to guide development of public projects, which could include streetscape projects or parks projects, and also to offer predictability to people as they are going forward with a redevelopment project, both for the developer and for the community. They are not intended to do a few things as well, and that includes, as I mentioned already, apply outside of the Reston transit station areas. That is not the intent of this document. So there are clusters that will be under the purview of the Reston Association that would not be considered part of this Reston transit station area document. They're also not intended to be prescriptive or inflexible standards. That's a reason why they are a separate document as opposed to be included in a zoning ordinance, a PFM, a comprehensive plan. They're intended to be separate for a reason. Excuse me. They are not intended to replace existing comprehensive plan policy or to replace existing processes or guidelines that may already be in place at different agencies or associations such as yourselves. And then finally, and this is a question we've gotten more recently, they're not intended to apply to individual homeowner decisions such as individual yard design or a renovation project for an individual property owner. They're intended to apply during the legislative process. So to get to this point, as Mr. Newland alluded to, we've been working with an urban design advisory group. I won't belabor you with reading all of the members of that group, but you can see it was pretty comprehensive. We had representatives of both the development community and the Reston Association, the Reston Town Center Association, and Reston residents, especially those who had a particular focus, such as bicycle and pedestrian accommodations or engineering. We really tried to make sure that we had a lot of areas covered with that advisory group. And then we worked with a separate one that was internal to the county staff that included agencies like the Department of Planning and Zoning, Fairfax County Transportation, the Park Authority, etc. As I mentioned, and this is a question that we have received already in the public review process with this draft, is why have a separate document? There are a few reasons. As I mentioned already, we'd like to have it be flexible, and when you include it in a more codified county document, that's a little more difficult to do. It's also a little more difficult to have the illustratives and the photographs that we've included through this document, and we really feel like helps enhance the character of the document. It's a little more difficult to do. I don't know if you've really ever sat down and read the county zoning ordinance cover to cover, but it's not particularly exciting. And we feel like it's a plus to be able to include in this document various images and graphics, which really help to further illustrate the point. Maybe not something we would be able to do in some of those other documents. And then in addition to that, we were able to offer multiple options, whereas sometimes in a codified document, everything seems like it's written as a standard and it's not necessarily inherently clear that there might be options. In this document, there are options that are included. So the format that I'll go over, and I apologize that so far these slides haven't been that exciting. They'll get more exciting, I promise. It's basically 6 chapters within an appendix. The first 3 are sort of devoted to setting the stage, and the back 3 are devoted to the actual meat of the document. Just briefly, the county's review process, and as you can see, there are concurrent processes that would be going along beside it. It's an iterative process, so we would be using these pretty much at every step of the way with our applicants who are coming in and responding to county comments, and then county comments going back to an applicant, and so forth and so on. And ultimately, it would get all the way up through the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors, and hopefully they'll rely on these as well. So this slide, I like to show before we get started into too much detail. These are the top 150 words that are found in the document. And I was very delighted to see that Reston is the largest one. The bigger the word, the more often it's mentioned in the document. And to me, that really is what we were hoping to achieve. We wanted this document to be about Reston and to be about Reston character. And so I was very happy to see that Reston is the largest word. It's the most commonly used word in the document, and I think that really harkens back to why it's so important to have a separate set of design guidelines that can be specialized and tailored directly to the needs of the Reston transit station areas, instead of just saying, let's just copy the Tysons one and put a new cover on it. We really tried hard to make sure that what we're doing here is unique to Reston. You can sort of start to see why. So as I mentioned, the first 3 chapters are really devoted to setting the stage for redevelopment in the Reston transit station areas. The first chapter provides a very brief overview of the development review process. It explains the organization of the document. The second chapter goes into the development vision and framework, which again is setting the stage for how an applicant should approach a redevelopment project in the Reston transit station areas. And then finally, the third chapter provides an at-a-glance summary of the comprehensive plan. It's not intended to be all-inclusive, but it is intended to give people enough information to kind of know where they're starting from when they start in a particular district or sub-district. Chapter 4, probably our largest chapter, and it covers a very wide range of topics. Everything from urban parks to utilities are included in this site design chapter, and it really begins the more detailed information about the urban design vision that's included in the comprehensive plan. You can sort of see there photos along the bottom that are indicative of the types of things that chapter begins to discuss. Public art, parking, and that includes on-street parking, bicycle parking, parking garages, bicycle and pedestrian circulation. It's a very large chapter, and it covers a pretty comprehensive array of topics. So here's a sample from that chapter. As you can see, this particular section is bicycle access and circulation. So as I mentioned at the beginning, we really tried to focus on setting up the the organization of the document into a series of intent statements and design strategies. The intent statements being the overarching goals of what we wanted to get in that particular sub-area. So in this case, bike access and circulation. And then that's followed up by a series of design strategies that help to implement or achieve those intent statements. At the beginning of the document, it's made clear that we're always open to exploring other other design strategies, excuse me, as long as they're consistent with those intent statements. That's what the crux of what we really want to achieve. And then the design strategies are ways we see you being able to achieve those things. But we encourage you to come up with your own that could implement those same intent statements as well. And then you see like what we were talking about with the graphics and the illustratives, helping to illustrate the points even further. Chapter 5 is our building design chapter. The advisory group, I think very early on, and Richard, you can correct me if I'm wrong because you were on it before I was on it. So we really decided not to dictate too much one particular style. The point was to say these are the types of things that make up a well-designed building: good massing, good articulation, well-designed details, but not to specifically say the buildings in the transit station area should look like this specifically. So the chapter is a little bit shorter because it doesn't provide as much specificity, but you can see a screenshot here. We really try to get into keywords like create, encourage, enhance, consider, be consistent with, be compatible with existing character. Those are the types of phrases that you'll see throughout the document, not just this chapter. And then again, the graphics and illustratives. The majority of the photos throughout the document are Reston or the DC metro area. We really wanted to make sure that the types of examples that we were showing were things that were actually achievable. Hawaii is very nice, but not necessarily something that's appropriate in Reston. So we didn't want to show a bunch of pictures with palm trees and beautiful, vacation style buildings. That's not necessarily the goal that we're going for here. So we tried to make sure that what you're looking at is something that is appropriate to this region of the country. We do have a few examples that are pulled from exemplary projects elsewhere, but we really tried to make sure that we were focused on the DC metro area. So you will see a lot of graphics and imagery from this area of the country. And the final chapter that I'll go over, and that's because it's the final chapter, is chapter 6, which is our streetscape chapter. And it too covers a wide range of topics, from the landscape amenity panels, sidewalks and building zones, to the street sections that have been developed and worked on with Fairfax County Department of Transportation. It also includes guidance on things like street furniture. I don't know if any of you are very familiar with the Tyson's guidelines, but this was again something that was decided on early by the advisory group. Tyson's specifies the type of light fixture or type of bench or furniture that should be in a particular area of Tyson's. The advisory group felt very strongly that that should not be the case in Reston. So there is not specific, you should install this bench. It's again, general guidance and flexibility that's meant to encourage people to think about the intent statements and come up with something that is consistent with the intent statements without necessarily prescribing one particular fixture. And this is just finally an example from chapter 6. You can see the road descriptions and classifications that are all based on the county's Transportation Department Urban Street Standards Project, and then a graphic representation of those, which I personally think are very beautiful, and all of the credit for them goes to my colleague Beth Elliott. She was very skilled at designing those. She took a very detailed and complex spreadsheet from the Department of Transportation and turned it into something quite usable and user-friendly and beautiful. So that was sort of the point of that, was to be able to take engineering speak that comes from our transportation planners and be able to put it into something that the average person could understand. Just briefly, because I want to be able to have time for questions and discussion with all of you, and I know I've been talking a bit already. We're sort of on a continuum here of the schedule for this project. Our ultimate goal is to get it for board endorsement sometime late this year or early next year. We're here with you guys in a cycle of reviewing the document with different community organizations. We've already talked to the Reston Town Center Association, the NVBIA chapter for Northern Virginia. We've talked to the county's Architectural Review Board. We talked to the Board of Directors Operations Committee for RA last week, and we're going to their Board of Directors meeting next week. So this month has been all about RA. We've got you guys covered almost every week this month. But that's sort of where we are right now, and then we'll be looking to take the feedback that we had from this and also from our community open house at the end of September and be able to make some edits to the draft and then hopefully get to the board later this year or early next year. I think that might be it, yes. So again, just thank you for letting me come here and talk at you, and I'm hopeful that you've had a chance to look at it. And now I just want to be able to have some conversation and answer questions and ask questions and
Okay, great.
see what your thoughts are.
Thank you. Would you mind running through all that again?
I can do that if you'd like to listen to me do it again.
Just kidding. I had a couple of questions.
Sure.
This, I guess it was, what, 3 or 4 years ago this all started, and I was sitting in the room with the other group of people. And some of the very initial questions we were all asking that I'm still curious about is how, a couple things, in the chronology and the timeline we're all looking at now, projects are getting built pretty quickly, they're getting through pretty quickly. Is this too late? And how is that going to relate to this? Like, Comstock's building another building. Are they having to adhere to this? I got 5 questions. Let me ask them all, then you can
Okay.
kind of lump
Sure.
it all together. It might be easier that way. So that was my first question, is how is that going to work for the projects that are either just approved, about to be approved, and so on? Who's doing that? I gather it's probably your zoning division is the ones in charge of doing all this and applying this. Too late is just a question I wrote down. Is it too late for some of the projects? Probably for some, I don't know, but that's the question. Some of this seems to, and we I think had some of this discussion, where the public facilities manual, we run into a wall there occasionally, and the ones, my favorite that drives me crazy are the cobra-headed fixtures that are, PFM insists on having every time someone develops something. And the most recent is over on Sunrise Valley, where they built, I don't know, 40, 60 townhouses, whatever, and they have cobra-headed fixtures with, I swear to goodness, 20-foot arms on them, and they look ridiculous. And that is in the TSA or whatever we're calling it, right? And I don't know how that happened, because it certainly wasn't something that was in here. And I'm sorry that got missed, if that was something that should have been looked at. And then the last question I had is, we talked, and I haven't gone through, I got all this business, but I haven't gone through the final report yet, but we talked a lot about buffers, and could you just illuminate or illustrate some of that?
Sure.
We like in Reston, we like setbacks, we like growing things in the setbacks and so on, and that was starting to get in here, and I don't know if it got in there, and if so, where, and what does it say? So those are just a couple questions I had, and we can see who else has questions, and then we'll throw the ball back at you.
Okay,
Is that cool?
okay.
Anybody else have any questions? Jason, any questions?
I just had, well, actually, you said in Reston we like buffers, and I don't, are you meaning like mounted buffers like you would put in front of a big box store?
Setbacks, perhaps, setbacks,
okay.
buffers, whatever you want to say.
Okay. Well, I just feel that the development of the TSA is probably more akin to build-tos than setbacks. And so I'm assuming the urban design standards cover that, but probably not setbacks.
Okay, yeah, some of it's, the zoning. Charlie?
I'm good now.
Ken?
I'll be good. No, I think your point of being too late, because I too was on the Reston board at the same time frame this was all initiated, so I'm just curious, there's a lot that's been ongoing with regard to cranes and buildings going up. And we're just now talking about finalizing this, and I'm just wondering where one will get out in front, so the DRB is not in reaction mode, or just out of the conversation entirely.
Yeah. Grace?
Oh, thank you. I have a question that's more specific. It's regarding the streetscapes. And I know you listed some streets, one of them being Old Reston Avenue, which is a Virginia byway. And I know, based under the information about the TSAs, you said that this will retain the aesthetic elements. But then under streetscapes, like under section 6, we're seeing the typical street sections. You're saying this is not prescriptive. Would there be some sort of, would this be different in a sense? I'm saying, are there going to be these Reston specific streetscapes going to be appropriate for other types of streets, or a part of the street, or the entire street, since Old Reston Avenue is a Virginia byway, and it does pose some challenges, especially with the slope and the narrow areas and some mature trees that are there.
Okay. That's the first round of questions.
Okay, all right. So let me just say thank you to Chris for having his iPad right in my line of vision where I can see the questions that he typed up. So to your first question, is it too late? You're not the first people to ask us that. That is a concern that people have been having. No, I do not believe it's too late. For one, we have had a pretty substantial draft for a few years now, and our office, but also other county offices, have been using the draft as we've been reviewing these applications. So they haven't been officially endorsed by the board, so of course we couldn't look at it and say thou shalt must do this, but that was never really the intent of the design guidelines anyway. So I know that I, for one, and my colleague David Goodman, who also reviews applications in Reston, we've both been using this document, and so have other planners and designers from different county agencies, again, the Park Authority, the Department of Planning and Zoning. We have what we consider a Reston core team, and I know I kind of flew by the slide where we talked about that, but it's an internal review team that each of these cases is reviewed by, and it's members of all kinds of various county agencies. We have sort of a core set of the core team, and then we add people to it as we need to, depending on the specifics of the individual case. For example, Heritage Resources might be brought in on an application, or Fire and Rescue, or what have you. But generally speaking, that core team has been aware of the design guidelines. Most of them have been involved in the creation of them, so they've sort of all been using them informally up until this point. The other reason I would say it's not too late is that we are starting to see applications come in with amendments to things that maybe were approved before. Some of the projects that were approved very early on were approved as CDP only, so now they'll be coming in for their FDP, their final development plan, and the county will be able to use this document in the review of those final development plans as well, but also just even applicants that had received final development plan approval and are now seeing maybe some shifts in the market, or they're acquiring a new tenant and that's generating a need to change a block design, they would then come in and this document would be applicable as well. So
Not to interrupt you, but
no,
are
it's okay.
the developers sensitive to this? Are they like going, wow, this is great, or?
So far, I feel like it's actually been pretty useful.
And I think, as you will recall, several of the major players were actually on the working group. We had Boston Properties, we had Comstock, and I think we had JBG, as I recall. And so they were aware of it as we were going along.
Right.
What Lauren didn't say was that we had a pretty good draft of them done through the working group, and then we had to wait for the county DOT and VDOT to agree on the urban street standards. So we kind of put it on a shelf for a little while. So we had the meat of it really available for us actually before the vast majority of the cases came through. I think probably the first Comstock was maybe the only one that we really didn't have them
done
around
before
for.
the plan,
But we've been using it, for example, Lauren is constantly having discussions where people come in and they don't want to do enough planting between themselves and the street, or they want to do a sidewalk that's really too narrow. And we've been using these and pointing to these and usually prevailing, I think.
Yeah.
You know, obviously there are times when what's happening in Reston, which is very different than Tyson's. Believe it or not, Tyson's is almost like a green field because everyone's tearing everything down, and so they start with almost a clean slate. Reston developments in the TSA have really been essentially infill developments, where people, as you well know, because they're not tearing things down, they're plopping things into green spaces or parking lots. So it creates some more challenges and where you have to make accommodations for existing conditions. So we use this as a base, but there are frequently places where an existing parking structure that's going to remain or something will be there, and you kind of have to walk around it. But it has been used extensively. We want to assure you.
Yes.
And I would say one more thing. The core team, Laura mentioned the core team. We started this with Tyson's, and it's been extremely successful because we have a group of people from the various disciplines who have learned to work together and compromise with each other. So instead of in the more traditional way of doing zoning cases where transportation is kind of in its stovepipe and wanting its little thing, and environment is similar, these are a group that has learned to understand that really any of these things is compromises that have to be worked out, especially because these are big, complicated developments. So we've wanted very much to keep an intact core team that is familiar with all the components of the comp plan and the design guidelines, the urban street sections, and really also hopefully where the community is. And so that we have felt has been pretty successful in Reston as well.
Want me to go to your
Will
next
this,
one?
just another question, will this become part of the zoning regulations, or how's
No.
it gonna get?
So they're
inserted?
standalone documents, and as Lauren said, we've had them for decades. Most of them have been skinnier. But what happens with the others, and we anticipate with this one, is the board will endorse them. And in the endorsement, it'll say, staff use this in your review of zoning cases. Applicants, please look at these, because we're going to be looking at, meaning the board and the planning commission will also be looking at them. And again, everybody, I think Lauren has stressed appropriately, that these are flexible and they are not the PFM. They're not going to mandate a Cobra headlight. They're not going to mandate any particular headlight fixture. But the board will say, this is what we think will help implement the comprehensive plan that we envision for the TSA. So they don't go into the PFM, they don't go into the zoning ordinance, they don't even go into the comp plan, although they emanate really from the comp plan.
So to sort of answer your second question as to who would actually be using these, we think it will probably predominantly be our office, but it will be many members of that core team as well. But we also hope it will be applicants who are looking at this and helping that to inform even their pre-applications with the county. So that would be the ultimate goal, is that applicants would be able to look at this and sort of have a common starting point for where they think the county might come from, even at a pre-application level. And then we also hope that members of the community will feel comfortable enough being able to review it as well. And we really tried to make it user-friendly, to sort of take out that planner language and make it something with all of the imagery and the graphics that people feel comfortable using, and being able to come to a public hearing and speak to the planning commission or the board of supervisors and say, hey, I read the design guidelines and they suggest these things, and I really feel like the county should ask for those things. So we hope that a lot more than just any one particular county office would feel comfortable using the document, but I think predominantly it probably will be relied upon during that back and forth iterative process that applicants go through with the county, but hopefully beyond that as well.
Right.
Oh, yeah, so we do, I didn't cover the appendix in here just because it really is a little more functional as opposed to illustrative, but we do have a development checklist that's in the back that applicants would be able to use as well, and that county staff, and I've been using that for the entire time that I've been working for the county. It was actually really helpful when I came here. I used to work in historic preservation, and when I moved to the county and started working in this, and I was like, oh my gosh, what do I do? I found that development checklist really helpful. So I've been using that for a couple of years now, actually. To answer, oh yeah.
So the other part of that is, we feel that if developers understand their expectations before they put their consultant teams to work and invest a lot of money going down a path that maybe isn't the path people would like, they're then a little more reluctant to change. So our hope is that if they look at it and their consultant teams look at it first, then we'll have less of a disconnect and fewer places where we're asking them to change and they're saying, but I spent a lot of money and I did whatever. So that, and we've been told that in Tyson's, in fact, it has worked that way, and that's our hope for Reston as well.
So I think the next question was about the PFM and the Cobra headlights. I agree with you, those are not great. We are aware of the problem of the fact that Dominion Power only accepts so many along public streets. There is a big initiative going on to sort of work with Dominion to try and get them to add a little more variety to what they will accept. So hopefully we will eventually get to a point where we are able to move beyond the Cobra head, so to speak. The design guidelines, again, didn't specify a specific light fixture the way they did in the Tyson's guidelines, but we have talked about the importance of pedestrian scaled lighting, which I think you could all very easily say a Cobra head is not pedestrian scaled lighting. They talk about the importance of lighting that is compatible in terms of the design of the lighting being compatible with the design of the architecture of the development. So I think that we do have elements in here that would allow us to sort of be able to speak to that during the review of an application. There's also an effort right now at the county to be able to update the PFM so that areas that do have urban design guidelines could rely on the guidelines as opposed to relying on the PFM, which will then give us even more flexibility with an applicant to be able to say, yeah, the PFM says do that, but these guidelines say do this, and the PFM allows you to do what the guidelines say. So
Right,
that's going to be a
right.
good win for us as well.
You know, 1,000,000 years ago, 20 years ago, we've had more lighting task forces here in Reston than you can shake a stick at. And one of them, way back, they did where are we now? Probably around the year 2000 or so, 1998, they did the I don't know what they called it, the Reston experiment, where they put all the square box fixtures in intersections and so on and so forth. When South Lakes High School, 10 or 12 years ago, came to us for a development, they were hell-bent to put, I think it was 9 Cobra head fixtures on South Lakes and 9 Cobra head fixtures on Ridge Heights, the street behind it. And we jumped up and down and yelled and screamed enough that they finally came back and did what we call the Reston experiment light, which is the square box fixture. And they put 2 at each entrance, and it's more than enough light to do anything. But we went through this process, meeting with the supervisor and everything else to try to get it. And so it happened there, and it's kind of too bad it didn't keep happening. Because somewhere someone said Uncle Harvey or whoever made these lights had his whole stash of them, and they were supposed to get used, and they got used at South Lakes High School, and they never got used again. And I don't know how we can find those lights, but it would be great if we could start using them again, because it kind of became a Reston light instead of a Cobra head. You had the box light.
So Dominion, so as Lauren alluded to, our board has been frustrated, frankly, with Dominion and their lack of, first of all, the ability to trade in the older lamps for the LEDs,
Right.
and also the lack of variety on the fixtures. So we do actually have a couple of fixtures now. They now will add a shoebox to their repertoire instead of a Cobra head. It's a little better, it's not fantastic. But we're also looking through a consultant to see whether we're still pushing on Dominion to increase the repertoire. They don't want to do it countywide. We have something like 70,000 streetlights, so you can understand why they're not thrilled by having 50 or 500 different kinds. But we have not given up on trying to work with them, particularly in our activity centers, to allow more customization. So it may not be, we may not have an answer with you today, but through the council, through the Northern Virginia something authority. It's a planning authority, it's the Northern Virginia Planning Council, I think it's called. The various jurisdictions have been working together, pushing on Dominion Energy, and we've had some success, and we're hoping for more. So maybe in a few months, we can come back with a better report for you.
Okay. Without going through this whole thing, what can you just tell us what is in here about streetlights?
So there is a spread on streetlights. Again, it doesn't recommend one particular fixture,
Okay.
but you can kind of see. Okay, we can kind of pass that guy around. It does, like I said, talk about pedestrian scaled lighting or lighting that's compatible with the character of your development.
Yeah.
There are no Cobra head examples in the photographs, so we
Kudos
have
for
tried.
that.
Yeah. We have tried to sort of get away from that as an example of an urban streetlight. So it does get into lighting. I'll be curious to know if you feel like it gets into it far enough.
This one looks a little bit like a Cobra head.
It does, but in real life, it's actually very slim and
I'm just
very,
teasing you, but it's,
very contemporary.
no, it looks a lot better, yeah.
I think that might actually be one of the ones that's approved for use in
I
Tyson's.
see it at the bottom there, yes.
That's it, they need that back.
So your next question, I think, was about the buffers and the setback and the vegetative buffers. We have tried to infuse that into this document as many places as we can. It's one of the, I think, things that sets this document apart from any of the other design guidelines that our office is working on or has worked on or has already gotten approved. The comprehensive plan speaks to what's called the Reston-specific streetscape, which is a wider landscape panel with more randomly spaced, naturalized plantings as opposed to your standard like one tree every 30 feet. And so one of the things that happened when I got here and I started reviewing applications and I would say, okay, show me your Reston-specific streetscape. And applicants would say, we don't know what that is. I would come back and I would say to my boss, I'd be like, okay, what is Reston-specific streetscape? And I was like, we don't know what that is. We kind of look at it and we sort of like go back and forth a little until we feel like we're at a comfortable place. So that was one of the things that I felt like really needed to be added to the document so that people feel like they have a starting place in terms of talking about what is Reston-specific streetscape. And the photos that are in there include sort of those existing little thickets of trees that are in the Reston area. They're all over the place. I'm sure you're all very familiar with them. That's sort of like the starting point, is that more natural, sort of undulating non-traditional streetscape. And we would be looking to applicants to provide that in every single project, and to continue them from project to project to project as other people come online. So there will be streets that have a traditional one tree every 30 feet situation, but there will be also streets that have this sort of more natural, more Reston character to them. This document creates options for people. Again, there may be opportunities, for example, if the Comstock project at Reston Station were to come in today, there might not be an opportunity to provide sort of that thicker vegetative buffer, but there might be ways to accomplish that Reston character in other ways, given the urban nature of the site. So there are sites where there might be alternatives or options. And again, this document attempts to provide that flexibility. But I will be curious to know what you think as you read it, to see if you feel like we've adequately incorporated that. I think, as was mentioned, we don't get into setbacks per se, because that is something that's specified by the zoning ordinance. But it does talk about build two lines and being consistent and compatible with your neighbors. So it gets into it from that perspective, but doesn't specifically address setbacks. And then I think the last one was Old Reston Avenue. We do acknowledge, both in the third chapter, which goes into the comprehensive plan summary for each district, and also in the street network discussion, that Old Reston Avenue is a scenic byway, a Virginia byway. That is the good thing about the urban street standards, is that they do give the Department of Transportation the flexibility to say, this street has a different character and you need to do something different here than what you would normally do. Right now, it's sort of like, the VDOT standard is this, so this is what you have to do, and we don't have a lot of flexibility. Our Department of Transportation colleague was not able to be here tonight, and if you have, I will admittedly say I'm not a transportation planner, so if you have more specific questions about how that all works, I'm happy to get you in touch with the right people. I do know that it has been a concern, definitely, both from a standpoint of what development would look like along that road, but also what the road itself would be. And at every turn, Fairfax County DOT has been very careful to respect the character of that road. The 1801 Old Reston Avenue project, sort of at the top of Old Reston Avenue, that was one in particular where we really worked with them on the streetscape along Old Reston Avenue, because we felt like when they initially came in, it was not consistent with the character of that road. It was much too sparse, much too urban, and we really worked with them to set the building further back from that, to have additional landscaping on both sides of the sidewalk to really kind of create the feel that the rest of the street has. So that's really the only application that we've had along there that we've gotten very far with. So obviously that's been approved. But so far, FCDOT has been really willing to be flexible and work with applicants along that particular roadway to be respectful of the byway.
In this case, you could think about, for instance, instead of having a dedicated bike lane, you could have a share road due to the width of the road, or, so
Right.
I can understand.
Right.
Thank you.
Is that, the project you're talking about, is that the one that includes the old mansion that's there, the
No.
fellowship house, whatever they call it?
This is 1801 Old Reston. It's at Temporary and Old Reston Avenue, kind of at the top.
The green roof?
The back.
Yes, right across from the,
Is that the
Yeah,
bank?
I think
Or
so.
the
I
bank?
think it was the
Yeah.
Renaissance Central that Sonny Small brought.
We
in.
haven't seen AFMA in a
That's
really long
taking out
time.
his low rise.
It's like the old mansion, what do you all call that?
Oh,
Uh,
yeah, was the,
That one's technically, it has a couple of names, Sunset Hills or the A. Smith Bowman House, but
Bowman.
that did have an application in on it. It's been dormant for almost 2 years at this point. So I don't know where that is in its process, but that was definitely a topic of conversation with them. They have some
Hopefully
kind of,
this will be official by then.
yes, hopefully so, because, that one was one that had both heritage resources implications and impact to the byway. Well, I just want to close in saying thank you again. I know I talked at you a lot, and it was a lot of information. We do have a very small survey online, so if you're reading through the document and you feel like, oh, that was something I wish I could have asked, or I wish I would have said, please feel free to fill out the survey. Oh, sorry, was there one more?
I'd like to ask one more question.
Yeah, and I have something else I was just.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Is there any specific guidance on North Town Center?
Okay.
Nothing specific for that site.
Good question.
Okay. And the other, we have a couple of minutes, I just wondered, I sometimes hesitate to do this, but if there are any questions anyone out there might have, in the front row, yes, sir, if you come up, make sure the green light's on the microphone, tell us your name and address, and if you have a question, go for it, we got a little bit of time here.
Hi, my name is Steve. My name is Stephen Canner. I live at 1417 Belcastle Court, and I had about 3 questions. One of you asked, is it too late? And as somebody who's not steeped in all the whereas and the wherefores, as a citizen of Reston, I think it is too late. I get the feeling, looking around what's going on in the transit area, so I don't know what can be done about it. Second thing I'd like to point out is some of the pictures in this illustration. For example, you say here, create comfortable places where people want to be. I don't think that's a picture of someplace in Reston, so I'd like to know what that picture is. And then underneath it says support increased pedestrian traffic near Metro Rail stations. Well, I go by the Wheelie station all the time. How are you going to increase pedestrian traffic near the Wheelie Metro? I have no clue, and I'd like to hear what you can share with us, what your ideas are. On the building design, you have a picture of the boulevard here, and one of the criteria, it says emphasize placemaking harmony and architectural design and integration with nature. There is no nature in this area when you walk to the Metro. So I'd like some explanation of that. And then on your membership list, which sort of gives one the impression of approval by people who are involved in what you have done, your work you have done, you have people on this list who are dead. Frank De La Fay, Robert Simon, some others. So I just like to know, as an ordinary citizen, is this too late? What impact can we have? How do we avoid looking like, Arlington or where the movie house is in Angelica? It's very uncomfortable. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think what we can do, if you all wouldn't mind.
Oh, the last thing was, when you talk about design, there's no mention here about the impact on traffic. I mean, try to get through the Reston, the Wheelie Avenue, Sunset Hills in the morning, and traffic is horrendous. So what can you tell us about that?
The suggestion I was gonna make is, I think there are a couple of other questions, we're gonna run out of time, but maybe you could write a letter back to us to respond to some of these questions.
Sure, yeah,
Otherwise,
we'd be happy
you know,
to do
I
that.
appreciate that.
Yeah. Can we get the questions now, and then we can give you something
Yeah, that way we
later?
can
Because I
get
know you
through
have
this.
your real meeting after us, so I don't want
Yeah, let's
to
do
push
that.
you off.
Yes, sir. Give you about 2 minutes, we're gonna run out of time.
I'm very clear. My name is Marc Malkin. I'm also a resident from Whole Fields area. So with that, relative to Jason Best's question, page 319 for dealing with Reston North Hills. Relative to streetscapes, my question really is how much will FCDOT and VDOT adhere to these recommendations? Because the streetscapes that you refer to, like Grand Boulevards being Sunrise Valley Drive, further to where my area of interest is, which is the Herndon TSA and the Herndon TOD in particular, are such that it's, as your boss said, it's infill. It's not possible physically to do what is in the guidelines. So within that respect, there are several areas that I have to go to the survey. There is no such thing as the Sunrise Valley Nature Preserve. There is no such thing as the Sunrise Valley Wildlife Habitat. It is a wetland that's on private property that's posted. It's not a park on that. Yet it is in the comprehensive plan to be a key feature of the Herndon TSA, but there is no path forward to get there. So when you also have, there's terminology of view corridors from high-rise buildings to Dulles Toll Road. There's no explanation, I believe, in that that describes what that means. Those are just a few of the things that come through. I commend you for the guidelines as they exist, but they are just that, guidelines. Thank you very much for your
Okay, thank
time,
you.
sir.
Anybody else? We have time for maybe one more, but nope, okay. Oh, yes, we have one more? Okay.
Some of the comments I had, I've been in Reston for 30 years.
Can you give us your name, please? and address?
Curtislytic, I live at 1662 Oak Spring Way, just off of North Shore. When I came here 30 years ago, there was a welcome center and kind of explained the idea behind Reston. And I'm a real estate developer and I've done projects all over the country and I've lived all over the world. And when I hear people say, we want this to be part of a next iteration of Reston, and I look at the Wheelie Avenue Reston stop, Comstock's property, if someone says that's a success, that is horrible. This is a horrible development. It's all closed in like a castle. There's no green space. It's not integrated into Reston at all. The transportation by bicycle, by walking, by driving is horrible. We don't want to continue to have that throughout Reston. One of the ideas behind Reston is you can walk to your grocery store, convenience marts, playgrounds, swimming pools. I don't see any integration with any park space in any of these developments. Now you can walk down the sidewalks at the Reston Town Center. Are you going to take your daughter or your son there to learn how to ride their tricycle? No, where is their green space? What is the benefit on how we're developing these transit spots with the existing residents of Reston? How do these projects benefit us? We're the taxpayer. We're the ones, the reason Reston's a success is because of our investment in our community over the last 50 years. Now we have development coming, which is good, but it's not integrated. I don't see any benefits to the residents of Reston except for the train stations themselves. What is this commercial development? What is that bringing to me? These design guidelines, they are very attractive, but they're not where a place that you would go and sit in a park or kick a soccer ball or teach your kid how to play a catch or ride their scooter. These are very urban spots. And this is not a safe place. You look at these pictures, you would never take your kid to learn a tricycle there. That would not be the case. You don't want to take your dog to walk on a concrete sidewalk either. Why aren't these projects being integrated into Reston? Why aren't there park spaces that continue, so you can see into them and also access them easily? I don't see any of that happening. And I think there's opportunity here for everyone to be successful, but I don't see the people that live here. We should all be, there should be hundreds of people here. There's no notices of these meetings. You know, once they get them on, maybe online, but there should be some notices. This is really important. This is changing the character of our hometown. Thank you.
Thank you. I think the challenge of having a more urban style coming into Reston is a problem. I think that's what you guys are trying to address. And I think, you know, there's probably still some work to be done, but the application of this is what concerns me the most. Hopefully you guys have strength, power, and will to see it's done. If everything you're talking about in this book gets done, it will be a better result. So anyway, thank you all for coming.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate that
And we
for
will
your
respond
time.
to the questions. Thank you.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Oh, and also, in the handout, there's the link to the survey, but you also, so you can respond that way, or you know how to reach us, and we'd be happy to take any other comments you may have.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Okay, we're gonna have a little break. In 10 minutes, we'll start our regular meeting at 7 o'clock. Okay, welcome to, where are we? I guess it's October 16th, Design Review Board meeting. We're now in session. We have our quorum up here. We're going to go on and start. We just finished the Reston Transit Station Guideline meeting that was for about an hour. You all missed it. You missed a really exciting time. In beginning our meeting, we need an approval of last meeting's minutes.
So moved.
There's a motion, is there a second?
Second?
Motion is second, all those in favor?
Aye.
I need an approval of this evening's agenda.
So moved.
Second?
There's a motion and a second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. General members' comments. We have, anyone has a general comment about the wonderful job the Design Review Board is doing, it's always welcome. And, young fellow in the back over there, Larry Butler.
Larry Butler, Reston Association staff. You're doing a wonderful job. I'm here to ask you and mention to you, Margo and I have been discussing with Inova and Fairfax County about the Reston Town Center North. It's interesting that it came up tonight in the guidelines discussion. Jason asked that question. They have requested a work session with the DRB and preferably one on site. And they are working with the supervisor's office to hopefully do something like that in November, I think. This is sort of their target, to so meet at the supervisor Hutchins' office as an inside place, and then actually go and walk a little bit of it. I know it's a 47-acre site. It's hilly on the east side, but they wanted to get that in front of you to see if you would be willing to do that, if the date that works out.
Is this projected for November, is that what you said?
Yes, November.
Do you know what the temperature is gonna be?
I predict about 50 degrees.
So a van and beverages are involved?
We have a bus.
We possibly could get a bus, yes.
Yeah, I mean, weather permitting, I think that's,
Yeah.
is this a daytime or evening or?
Daytime,
Daytime?
Daytime.
So it'd be like around a lunchtime or something?
preferably.
We can probably get some people there for that.
Absolutely.
Just coordinate with Margo or Anna and let us know what you have in mind and when this might be.
Okay.
I think we can do it. It's an important enough project. We'll
Make the
gladly
effort.
accommodate.
Absolutely.
Glad, I like that. Okay, you see, you're working well and you're glad to accommodate. All right, that's it.
Okay, thanks,
Thank you.
Larry. Any other members' comments? Yes, ma'am. Julie. You're gonna have to kind of hold it.
Gonna
These
have
things
to
don't
hold it.
bend. Everyone keeps trying to bend them, but they don't bend.
I wanted to relay, I'm Julie Bitzer, 2020 Peppermint Court, Reston, and I wanted to relay a message that I got from one of our members, Steve McElroy, who is a resident at the Lake Ann Fellowship House. And he asked me that if you get the chance to speak with members of the DRB tonight, please tell them how thankful our residents are to them for all their hard work getting us to where we are today. To see how well the Fellowship Square Foundation and Community Preservation and the Development Corp responded to the DRB request has been wonderful to watch. We are incredibly blessed to have so many fine people working for this extremely important redevelopment project. It will serve so many folks for so many years to come, and we think it will prove to be a major plus for our Reston community.
Thank you.
Thank you. And on that note, we have a workshop scheduled with them
26.
the 26th. So that will happen. Anyone else? Okay, we'll jump on into the agenda. The first item on the agenda, Sunrise Valley to Sheraton. Is anyone here to discuss that? Come on up, have a seat. Make sure your green light is on before speaking, and we'll start. Or you'll start.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. But as you all know, Brian Winterhalter with Cooley. Nice to see you all again. I am here with Daniel Russell of Dove Hill, the ownership for the Reston Sheraton, and Tobias, the architect. And I am going to be mercifully brief and turn it over to them to go through the presentation.
Tobias Stroh, 1600 Winecoop Street, Denver, Colorado. I'm with Johnson Nathan Stroh, architects, interior designers. We were retained by Devil Companies to work on a renovation of the existing property at the location in question here. And I don't know who's going to scroll through the, you are? Cool. Yeah, thank you. So this is what it looks like, well, what it looked like a few months ago, last winter. But still kind of looks like that currently existing building, Sheraton Hotel. And we are taking the opportunity to dress up the building on the exterior as it needs renovation anyways, and introduce some scale elements that make it a little bit more appealing from a pedestrian standpoint. Using biophilic design inspired by the nature and the context of that exists around the property. So here are some of the materials that we selected, and I did bring a board that looks a little bit worse for wear. I apologize for that, but it didn't fare well over the 1,500 miles. This is as a starting point, which you could pass around if you want to kind of look at this. Sure. And just to frame that a little bit, we are still looking at materials, and we always tend to. Locations and materials are intended as shown, but colors are likely to morph slightly as we go and as we do a on-site mock-up later in the process. So it's, it might alter its appearance slightly. There were some thoughts, and it, obviously in a artificial lighting environment like here, it doesn't really explain itself too well anyways. So it's just as kind of understanding what we're generally looking at. If you want to go to the next. So I spoke to the biophilic design. So one of the main design elements that we're introducing is this simulated wood metal product trellis element, both in the approach to the property and surrounding the main entrance, pedestrian and vehicular drop-off. Cool. If you want to go to the next image. So we overlaid a little bit the changes that we're making on the overall building, proposing some new colors, new finish on the exterior, basically repairing the existing concrete and stucco finish that exists with new. One key thing to mention here is that we are going to return with a signage application and exterior landscape architecture as well, which is not part of this initial submittal that we provided. We're just calling out signage locations roughly where they will be in this package. Stop. Could you just go back? Sorry. So as you can see, when you approach from the roadway driving up to the property, there's an existing sign, and then you can sense sort of the change in color and new signage, and there's also an intended new accent piece that we're wanting to introduce on that main beacon element at the entry there, which will be largely a smooth stucco finish with some scoring and control joints and some brass accents and lighting that we're looking at on this piece.
When the samples get back around to you, can you point to which sample is which?
Yeah.
I gather the tower on the end is one color, and then the body of the building is another.
Yeah, and we'll
That's
get,
your intention.
there are elevations in the set, so I'll kind of speak to that at that point a little bit more clearly, because it's hard to read from here what's what on there.
Okay.
But
You got it back
that's,
to point,
I believe that's paint.
Yeah.
So on the tower element, the darker color is the PT3, and then we have a sort of medium color for some of the accent pieces in the structure. It's really tied to what the structure is and how it presents itself, and the opportunities to vary the color a little bit, because currently it's just a sort of off-white one tone.
So
on
the
entire
main
building.
body of the building is going to be which color? The lighter color there?
It's going to be the lighter color, yeah.
All right.
So if you can go to the next. So this is just showing some inspirational images on this biophilic. We also are going to look at, again, landscape is going to be a separate submittal we're going to come back for, but we're looking at a green screen element at the entry, which we'll have to work through with the landscape architect in terms of what the best solution is for that, so that it'll go well. And then this is showing the stucco finishes, the brass metal accent, and then the existing roof, which is getting repaired, repainted, in some areas. So that's that sort of darker gray piece. It's got a standing seam metal roof basically on there currently. And then the wood accent.
Which
and
roof
some-
is that, just so I'm clear?
all
The
the,
existing
all the,
arched
all the
roof.
existing sloped roofs that are on the building. And they come down, they have these eyebrows that come down eventually. And then a screen element that we're gonna introduce also, as part of the entry. There's gonna be a small addition in the courtyard where there will be a new restaurant, and it'll have a dedicated entrance also at the main hotel entrance, which will have a screening element, something to identify it a little bit more clearly. You can go to the next. So this screen, then we continue to take that idea, and we're looking to implement that as an accent piece throughout the entire building, you know, at the guest room locations. Partially to screen some of the PTAC louvers that are currently there, although where they remain exposed, there are also going to be new low-profile louvers, so they're going to integrate better in the facade and kind of make them go away. Next. So this is then showing the before and after situation at the current main entry vehicular drop-off. So you can see we have that wood trellis element, or simulated wood. It's a metal that looks like wood for maintenance reasons, introduced there to bring down the scale as much as we can. On one side, we need to keep the taller height because it's a fire department access, and there'll be bus drop-off and things like that. But on the more inboard portion, we're looking to reduce the height a little bit, and then also carry that into more of a three-dimensional element that shows up when you arrive at the building, and then carries around the corner to where the restaurant entrance is located. Next. So
Just a
these are
question
now.
on that last one, while
Yeah.
we're looking at it.
Go back.
Are some of these, in quotes, wood panels, I gather they're metal with a wood face, some
Right.
miracle material, which is great. But are they actually blocking some of the windows when they come through? So
They
if I-
will be in front of some of the windows. So the guest rooms are configured such that they're basically windows side to side, wall to wall. And there's going to be significant still visual openness
So
within the
you'll,
guest room.
you'll see it from the inside in
You'll
some
see some
cases.
trellis, but
Right.
it'll be transparent and
Okay.
easy to see through.
All right.
So these are just elevations. I mean, they're fairly self-explanatory. I think there was some confusion about the size of the panels before, so we introduced these little key plans that show you on the top right-hand corner in this case, where that elevation is, from where it's looking and which direction it's looking. So it's clear that we're looking at the curved portion of the building here, and the trellis elements just surrounding that portion on the building. That's really the only addition here. Next. So that was kind of the before look, and then the after look with the colors now, and you can kind of see the sort of intermediate gray color on the vertical structural elements, the lighter stucco color for the main body of the building, and then the darker color that's a continuation of what the roof color is, essentially. So that's what the large element is, if you go to the next.
Are the window
this is-
frames remaining the same? They're sort of black?
They're a
black.
dark anodized finish. They're going to remain the same, yes.
Okay.
They're in some areas they need to get refinished, repaired, but they're going to remain the same color, yes. That's basically this metal number 2 here that was on the. So this is the before view. So if you go to the next, please. So there you can see that darker accent now at that main vertical element at the entry, and then again the wood applications and the 2 different additional stucco colors aside from the dark. And then also you can see a little bit of the brass accents on the main vertical element that has those striations that we're adding there, where the new signage will go adjacent to that. So there'll be basically some lit accents on that wall as well, so it doesn't look quite so stark as it does currently. Next, please. So then, going around the building, again, this is the view before. This is actually the view that faces the main road, but it's mostly screened by an existing office building, and also quite a bit set back from the main road, so you can't really see this ever. But this is just to explain where the materials go. But you can see the access drive coming toward you here, one way, exiting with the current curved elements on the bottom right-hand corner of this view. If you go to the next. So this is where we're proposing the introduction of this trellis element here, and you can see sort of included here an inspiration image of this thistle piece. We are going to come back for a separate signage submittal, but because this is so integral to the trellis in this case, we decided to include this particular piece here. And so it would just create this sort of shadow of the Sheridan branding piece there. Next. And then this is the final view before, and if you go next, this is kind of where the loading dock is central. But really, again, the only changes here is the color in the finish and repair, of course, of everything, and then the addition of the trellis element. And that's it. Questions?
Yeah. Let's see if anyone has any questions. Like Grace, why don't we start with you? Any questions?
I heard you said the landscape will be under a separate, landscape will be under a separate application. Is the only proposal you have the live-in wall for landscaping?
That's the main piece.
Okay.
Can you push this, or is it on? Oh, okay. That's the main element. But there's some cleanup and
Okay.
improvement that needs to be made to some of the sort of overgrown portions on the surrounding the building. And then there's a complete revamp of the interior courtyard, which we're working through as well, but it's not visible from the exterior.
Thanks.
Nick?
Sure. Did you guys take any cues or inspiration from the BLVD or the Spine Center building at all with the colors?
No,
Or it's
we-
kind of independent?
Yeah, we looked at it more, what's unique about the place, and you know, coming from Denver, obviously, we're not, you know, in this community, so we don't, but we always look at every project that we work on, we look at what the context is, and that's really what inspired us, was the biophilic aspect of it, because of the really lush nature surrounding it, and we want to enhance that and curate a little bit more, and then really improving the pedestrian, you know, and arrival experience, because that's kind of the first element for every hotel that's important, but here particularly, it's a very inhumane scale currently. You know, when you arrive there and you know, from the airport or whatever in a vehicle, you're getting dropped off, and all you see is sort of, you know, white and dark, and you know, nothing that is inviting and feels, you know, pleasant. So that's what we're trying to achieve. So we're not really looking at integrating it into other architecture, because there isn't. We generally also don't feel that. I mean, it's a stark building, but it's not a terrible architectural building in our opinion. You know, coming from architect, I mean, it's a late 1960s modernist structure. You know, so you got to take it for what it is to some extent. But we're trying to just improve it and bring maybe a little bit more of the connection to nature that was also part of, you know, modernist architecture, but often got forgotten in the process when the buildings were designed in the 60s and 70s.
And one other thing on the branding, is this a new thing Sheraton is going to use as branding? Is this a precedent, or has this been used elsewhere in the country for properties?
No, it's not. It's unique to this
this?
property. What is going to be consistent with Marriott/Sheraton brand will be what they're, you know, creating for their signage. If they're changing, we don't know that yet, because they're in the process just starting. If they're changing it, whether the fonts might change slightly, things like that, which is another reason why we kind of excluded the signage explicitly for now, because we don't know 100% yet what it'll be.
Thank you.
Ken?
No, nothing really at the moment. I do like their attempt to preserve the uniqueness of the building. And the only other question I had at the moment was with regard to lighting and any lighting plan as well. So.
Yeah, lighting is definitely part of the process. We have a lighting designer that's helping us, and you can see in some of the images, you know, the inspiration images, that there will be downlights, uplights to accent these pieces. It's critical always. Yes.
Okay.
Charlie?
Well, my concern is the entrance with the, fake wood. It just seems to be too much of it. Where's that? There. The accent panels up on the building look fine, but that big slab of it right at the entrance, and I mean, it's kind of like glossy and it looks like fake wood. And how is it gonna look in a period of time? It just, I don't know, there's just too much of it right there in that one spot to be an accent. It's just kind of worse in your face than, probably not worse than it used to be, but, or existing, but I don't know, I'm just concerned how that stuff's gonna hold up over a period of time and that big a mass of it.
Yeah, I mean, we've used the product on other projects, so I can speak to, I mean, it holds up very well. It's a screen printed finished product. Holds up a lot better than real wood, which is the main key reason to use it. But as far as the, concern with the amount is considered, we can certainly take another look at that in terms of quantity, exact quantity of it as it evolves. I can tell you that it's already evolving a little bit from that as we get into the technical solutions for that. And I think the rendering might be a little bit misleading. It really pops on the street.
Right, more so than it probably would in the real world.
Right. So we can, we can provide a little bit more detail on that, maybe some close-up views that are a little bit more detailed so that it's clearer how the scale works, if that would help. That's
Okay.
something.
Yes.
Jason?
Yes, I do. I agree. It's the rendering style that makes it look heavier than it is. I think in the end it would be nice and work with the building nicely. My question is, I'm typically not a fan of materials that are made to look like other materials. So if you're going to use metal, use metal. So was this a direction that you did? You wanted wood and you wanted that look, and you just wanted something more durable.
Correct.
And
yes.
so the stamping or the dye or whatever they use holds up over time.
Yes.
It's not going to fade.
Yeah, we've used it for example, in Colorado, which is a much more, taxing climate in terms of solar and hot and cold variations, and it's holding up very well. And it's, when it's in place, I think you'll be surprised. You really have to go up there and do this to really know that it's not wood at that point. I mean, it's very convincing.
So a hailstorm comes along and it's going to hold up.
Yeah.
And last comment, that porcelain tile is the best material on that board. I love it.
Okay. Yeah, this is actually, I didn't talk about this. This is sort of just addressing the wear areas in the drop-up area, replacing or cladding some of the stucco materials there to, again, give it a little bit more longevity and durable.
Okay. I just had a couple of comments, I think, to respond to what Charlie's saying. The rendering's not doing you any favors, I think, particularly at this scale, because it kind of blurs together. But it actually, are the arches that are currently there are going to remain behind this screening? Okay, so what
That's
this
just an
isn't
applied
showing you
signage.
is that you're going to be seeing light through this. It's not like a solid, the rendering makes it look like it's a solid wall, and it's not. It's spaced out, so I think that's going to help. Along those lines, are you going to be redoing the lighting inside under the canopy? So
Yes.
at night, it's going to shine through the spaces between the wood, which I think is a plus. And you answered the question, it's still a Sheridan, that's okay. The grow wall stuff can be a little problematic, and I think what we're going to be looking for is that the quality that you're presenting to us, if the reality is as close to the quality as what we're hoping, and the grow wall really does work, I mean, this is a weird climate too, as to what does grow, what doesn't grow. It'll grow halfway up and then fall over. I mean, so we're just emphasize things like that. You really have to make sure are going to work. And plastic ivy doesn't work, so.
Right, and we have a local landscape architect as well.
Okay, and we'll see that
So,
coming
yeah.
in the future. So, other than that, I think, what you're trying to do, I like the color scheme that you're talking about. It kind of brings it up, if not the late 1990s, almost makes it into 2010 and probably beyond. But, that this is a good thing. It's a good palette. I think the warming up the building is a good move. And real wood, fake wood on a building this size, we've had issues with real wood before, particularly on a parking garage just around the corner from where you are. We're not quite sure how that's going to work out, but I think if this is really something you've tried and it's tested and it really does work, I think it'll be okay. And it's from a distance, I mean, except right around the entry, people can actually touch it. I hope it's not like the corner of the National Gallery of Art where everybody touches those little points and they turn black and greasy after everybody does it. But, so it's a question of this quality. I think the design, overall design, I compliment you on that. I think it looks good. I think it'll bring this building up to where it kind of needs to be. And it, you know, it's, the strongest thing about this building is its footprint. And I think you're just emphasizing it with some nice little touches of color and warmth here and there. So I think it's fine. I guess it says on our agenda, this is an action item. So I guess if you're gonna come back with a whole bunch of other stuff, we're kind of, any approval we have tonight will sort of be predicated on seeing landscape, seeing lighting, all the other things you're talking about. But other than that, I don't have any other questions.
Signage and
And
such.
signage,
Although
you mentioned signage, lighting, and landscaping, are the three
They
things you
were
mentioned.
interested in getting that shared in the panels
Yeah.
approved.
And this is conceptual approval.
I mean, is that what you're looking for, conceptual approval?
Yeah, I
And
mean,
then-
we're aware that we're coming, we have to come back, and we're gonna come back and have.
So if we do conceptual tonight, then you can come back for final with all the other stuff. Okay. All right, that said, is there a motion?
I move to approve the conceptual presentation with the predicates of, we do need to see the lighting plan, the landscaping, signage. Did I miss anything?
No, those are the only three there.
I think that was it, yeah.
There's a motion, is there a second?
Second?
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Abstentions? Well done.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, next on our agenda, Dockside condominium. Anyone here for Dockside? Come on up and have a seat. Hey, Nick. And if you're gonna talk, try to pull the microphone closer to you. They seem to work better when you're closer. And no, they don't bend. They look like they should bend, but they don't.
So don't try.
Maybe bends. Oh, the top bends, okay. Okay. Welcome. The floor is yours.
You want me, I can go. Okay, hi, I'm Nikki Veleza, the watershed manager with Reston Association. Dockside is here to try to cure a violation of the open space. So 2 years ago, they cut all of the understory within the resource protection area, which is 100 feet from the water's edge outward. And they were found in violation and had to replant. So this plan now is to bring the planting palette that is approved by the county who oversees the resource protection area, saying that's appropriate and the numbers are okay for curing the violation. So we ask that you please approve it as submitted. What I did was after the last DRB meeting, it was my daughter's birthday, so I wasn't able to attend to explain everything. So since then, I went out and placed flags to demonstrate that there are locations that plants could be put in and the appropriate plants that can be found this season to be able to be installed before the end of the year.
Oh,
So that's the palette that you have in front of you.
and this, just to be clear, this, on this drawing, it's just this area that's in green?
Correct.
Okay,
So it's basically, if you're familiar with Dockside, they have stairs that lead down.
right.
So it's, if you're looking at the lake to the left of the stairs, just where there's open area,
Okay.
the only area that was cleared.
And this 42 plants and a whole bunch of shrubs, right? It's a lot of stuff.
Yes.
I would defer to our landscape architect up here.
I think it's my fault maybe that you guys are here, maybe not, because I had a concern with the replanting and the disturbance of a forest community that looks like it was coming back, and thought that maybe there was somewhere to maybe mitigate the violation elsewhere on the property. Your pictures with the white flagging helps a little bit. I think it's a different angle. The ones we were presented last time looked a lot more dense than it was. I think the plant palette might have had larger sizes on it too, which would have led to more disturbance and things not being taken care of as well. So I think the court size is more appropriate to go through and kind of try to mess up the roots of an established forested community. So I think this application is, revised tonight is satisfactory to me for bringing up the concern last time.
Okay.
And I don't have any additional comments as well. I'm assuming that there would be some sort of a maintenance schedule that you do have for making sure that the shrubs are established well. That's all.
Correct. Yeah, we would work with our landscapers and with the community, so it's make sure there's a water
Okay.
section.
Anyone up here have any other questions? Jason? Charlie?
No.
Ken?
No.
I guess we're ready for a motion. Anyone have a motion?
I will move that we approve the applications presented.
Okay.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Okay, good.
Thank you.
Well done. Thanks,
Thank
Nick.
you.
Thanks, Nick.
And your group there. Okay, I think what we usually do at this time is take about a 45-minute recess. Y'all don't mind, do you? There'll be beverages out in the hall. Okay, Waterford Square, come on.
I think that had an effect on
You sure you don't want that break?
Yeah, maybe in about 5 minutes. Just out of curiosity, anyone from Waterford Square here, raise your hand? Wow, look at that. And neighbors. Okay, just checking. Okay, gentlemen, you can identify yourself.
Thank you,
Go
Mr.
for
Chairman, members of the board. My name is Ed Donahue. I serve as local counsel to T-Mobile. With me at the table is Tim Dwyer with NBNC. He's been project managing, running documentation, leasing information, and securing the lease with Waterford Condominium. Also with me is Zach, Mr. Matt Butcher, who's our RF engineer and RF expert, and also Bill O'Brien with T-Mobile, if there are questions about T-Mobile's plans. You may recall, we were here back in the spring, and at that time, we were asked to, well, we were denied, but we did take a look at some of the comments and the discussions we had with you, in particular, the visibility of the proposed antenna from the front. So we have a redesign that we wanted to show you. We want to go through a very brief PowerPoint. I know there's folks that want to talk about a number of issues, but we want to try to get to the design issues, particularly design changes. So let's see if I can work this. So we were here, the decision came out in April, and we were directed to look at the visibility. So the changes that I'm going to go through are, we have a reduction in the size of the antenna inside of the screen wall, which allowed us to reduce the overall height of the screen wall, and then increase in the setbacks. The directive, the letter from the DRB from April 24, pointed us to the satellite antenna sections in your design guidelines. Well, satellite dishes really orient themselves up toward satellites. Unlike panel antennas, they really operate in a different way. So we asked the engineers what could be done in order to move the antenna. So we do have some changes to move the antenna back, again, inside of the screen wall. So let me get to that pretty quickly. Just to refresh your memory, there are 4 proposed sectors, and then the equipment is in the lower center, if you will, of the building, ground equipment. And I'm going to go through in each one of these sectors. So let me just show you where this is the...
Yep, pointers don't work on the screen, so.
Excellent. I beg your pardon?
Just take it with you. Yeah, it's mobile.
Maybe over here. That's okay. So I'm going to show you each of the sectors in some detail, but they are in the lower right, lower left, and upper right, and then the equipment cabinet toward the center of the building. The equipment cabinet doesn't need to be close to the edge of the building. It doesn't have that interaction with the customer. So these are the antennas
And the enclosures we're going to be talking about toward the roof edge. What we refer to as the gamma sector in the lower left portion of the building, so back here, this would be the sector in the lower left corner. Gamma sector, we had, on the left side, we have the old proposal, if you will, so no setback from one edge, and we increased that setback to 3'10". And again, the height of the structure is reduced by a foot.
By foot,
Yes,
as you
sir.
said?
Also, the gable sector, the western setback went from 1 foot 8 inches to a 4 foot setback, so 4 foot from the roof edge. The beta sector, which was in the lower right section of the overall roof plan, we went from a setback of 1.9 to 3.2. And then the beta sector facing east went from 1.8 to 4 feet. So between 3 and 4 feet increase in setbacks. This is the roof elevation, so the former application in the top, and the darker shading. So the overall height of the proposed structure is 74 feet and 3 inches, so reduced to 73.3. Photo simulation. So similarly to what we did last time, we tried to show you our view of what this proposed would look like. This is what we refer to as the alpha sector, view from Apricot. View of two of the sectors. This is the view from Fairway Drive, baseball field, looking to the north. So you have the gamma sector to the left, and then the beta sector to the right. Those are two of the ones that have increased setbacks, and again, reduction in the height of the concealment wall. Similarly, the delta sector and the gamma sector. View from Watergate, right? The delta sector as well. In discussions with Commissioner Carter, we were asked about similar installations, and we found this is the Heron House. And I apologize for the markup on it, but it does indicate that the ARB had reviewed and approved it. So these are some rooftop installations at Heron House. It was approved in 2017. This is probably the better view. You see the proposed, or the Sprint installations there in the roof section. Just gotta go here. So this is a Sprint screen wall to give you an idea what was reviewed and what was considered at that time. Mr. Carter thought it was worthwhile to talk about a similar installation that had gone through ARB consideration. We wanted to talk about some of the design changes. Obviously, we know that there are other issues. We looked at some of the comments that came in from some of the folks from the condominium. We do have a lease with the condominium. We do want to talk certainly about the design, and that's certainly the appropriate role of the DRB. This will go through the Planning Commission as a code feature shown application. Topics outside of the DRB, in our view, health effects. As council will tell you, this is not the subject of design review board consideration. I know it's on people's minds. We did bring an expert out here, but it's not the subject for Planning Commission or DRB review. Similarly, we did have a structural report done. We passed the structural with flying colors. We submitted that to the county for its consideration. And lastly, I just mentioned, and I'm going to go through as feature shown, as was the case last time. That's what I have in my presentation on direct. As mentioned, I brought a couple of other folks here. Oh, we do have the, I want to show you what the stealth material would look like. We had some questions about that, what that might be. So in order for the stealth concealment walls to work, the material has to be RF friendly. The signal has to be able to pass through. But that's some stealth material that we found to be effective, and that's what we've been proposing to use on each of the 4 sectors. That's it, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Let's make its rounds here for a second. All right, why don't we see if we have any questions from up here. Charlie, let's start with you this time.
Well, my concern is still the architectural quality of the shields. In fairness, I'm not an architect, but that's my concern, is just the appearance of the big corner
Questions?
shields.
Do you have any questions? We'll get to it.
Yeah.
opinion comments in a minute.
Yeah, no, I didn't.
Okay,
mean
we
other
understand
than
what
that.
they're proposing. That's good.
Right.
All right, Jason, any questions? Ken?
No.
Nick? Grace? Just to clarify what you're showing are, they're set back some additional distances and the little enclosure is about 12 inches shorter.
Correct.
And that's the big change from the last time we saw you.
Correct.
Okay. We have over 25 affected party statements, letters that range, I mean, I don't disagree with what you said about things that really aren't under our purview, but on the other hand, we kind of like to hear everything just because it's, you know, it's the quality of life issues that we are charged with dealing with, whether we're not doctors or whatever. So we don't need lengthy explanations about what these things are supposed to do or not do to people. But I think I'd be more than happy to hear every one of you guys out there. I read the 25 letters I had. Looks like there's more than 25 of you out there. I'm happy to have all of you speak, but if someone has already said what you were going to say, just say, I agree with the person before me, or what have you. If they're an officer that of the whatever you have, is it a cluster board, whatever you call it, they're allowed 5 minutes at a time, and everybody else can have 3 minutes at a time. So I'd like to give everybody a chance to say their piece if they have things they want to say. Just try not to repeat. So we can start, I've got these 2 pages, I can start reading from here, or we can just start in the front row and go from there. Or would you rather hear your name shouted out? Okay, we'll start there. Just give us your name and address
Sure.
and comments.
I'm Jean Bush, and I've lived in Reston for 48 years, and the last 20 have been at Waterford Square. Well, I guess we have the picture up here. I was going to say you brought the picture as well of what the building looked like. I'm not going to go rehash all the things I said last time or the things in my statement, but just a couple of issues to address on this new design, quote new. They propose moving the antennas back from the edge of the roof 1 foot, the screening and the antennas inside them, and the antennas up 1 foot. Okay, yeah, it's the same, it looks good. The proposed screening was going to then come down 1 foot or 2, but the screening would still be 12 feet high, so half again this height of this room, and 10 feet wide. So still rather large. And the pictures that are shown, when they were shown on the application, it was, you know, photoshopped so that the brick would look just like the original brick building. But of course, it won't look like the original brick building. It'll look like this one that they brought, or this picture that they enclosed with their application. I mean, it's plastic, and it's brick-colored plastic. I don't know how that's going to look after a couple of years, how it's going to look immediately, but it's definitely not going to match the brick in the building. So that's our, you know, one of our big problems with it. Well, as we said before, Waterford Square is unique. There's no other building like it in Reston. It's in a residential area surrounded by homes, no commercial activity, no commercial property within sight or nearby. We think that these antennas with their plastic coverings are going to cheapen the building and the entire neighborhood. We're not trying to live in the past. I know that a lot of people, you know, accuse people that lived in Reston a long time of not wanting to ever change anything, but we aren't feeling that way. We are having Verizon put FiOS in our building, and we've looked at having solar panels, which we feel would be really not possible if we have these antennas on the roof, which would be much more environmentally friendly and also, of course, financially better for us. We would not like to see the DRB allow T-Mobile to set up in a residential area. We'd like to preserve the unique parts of Reston architecture in our building. So please ask that you reject this application. Thank you.
Yes, it might be, well, yeah, just, I can't read half the writing anyway, so just.
I'll try not to repeat. I'm Alexa Choi. I'm a resident and owner of Unit 504 at the Waterford Square. I live with my husband and my 3-year-old daughter that was born in Reston. First and foremost, I do want to thank you, all for volunteering your time and skills to make Reston one of the best cities in the US. And that is a fact. I'm living proof. I've lived here, but it's also in Money Magazine, Fortune, and all that. So thank you for your time. It's very well appreciated. So I had 3 props to share tonight. One was the photo that my husband took this past winter of our building. And there's something unique about this building, and I don't know what the architect's vision was at the time in the 80s, but it was simplicity and the uniqueness of the fine lines. You can see the skyscape here. As we continue to grow at Reston, there's going to be a lot of high-rises that we'll see the top of our roof. So I just wanted to appreciate the architectural vision of the architect that created the building, and for us to preserve and respect that as we move forward in growing Reston. So I also wanted to share some of the wildlife that is in our area. Tom Brady, who's one of our resident owner in the building, he shared this beautiful photo of a perched owl on his balcony. It was a barred owl, one of the wildlife that live here. Can you imagine what that owl and his friends would experience flying at the top of our building? I don't know. I'm just venturing to guess. It's probably not going to be pleasant. But just some of the wildlife effects is a deep concern for me. The other thing I did want to share with our resident fellows here is this wonderful magazine that gets published, right? And one thing I noticed in this particular edition of the magazine is how much Reston is growing. It's beautiful. The modernization is needed. However, there's a historical component that we do want to respect and preserve. And I do want to call to everyone's attention a particular article authored by our chair, Richard Newland. It is called Development in Reston, and I do want to quote, "Balancing the developer's desires, namely here T-Mobile, for a profitable project with the real need to respect and preserve our community and our neighborhoods is of a paramount importance." And I think that that's very relevant in this area. And the last thing I did want to share as a prop is this flyer that myself and Jean, who just spoke, worked on. It's a flyer that we shared with our resident. I know neon orange, I did some neon yellows and neon pinks and whatnot. But the title is T-Mobile Strikes Back. Act now, stop cell phone antennas on our roof. And it has a picture of Darth Vader, which I know it's Halloween's coming. I thought, jazz it up. But as I was passing this out to all of our neighbors with my 3-year-old daughter, my daughter said, so obviously she doesn't know Star Wars, she doesn't know Darth Vader. She says, "What is a skeleton?" Right? It's hard to explain to a 3-year-old what Darth Vader is, right? However, I can imagine how difficult it is to tell her years later why we lived in a building that had cell phone antenna radiation that could potentially have negative health effects. I don't know how I could have that conversation, and I really do not want to think about that. But thank you for your time.
Okay, you're welcome. And just so you all know, thank you for quoting the article that just came out. I'll be having an autograph session out in the hallway.
Yeah, all right.
Yes, sir.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the DRB. My name is Gustavo Mauricio. I'm the very happy and lucky husband of Mrs. Alexa Choi. I live in Waterford Square, Unit 504. So here we are again, Groundhog Day, Halloween style. So let me address a couple of issues. One is we were not impressed by the lack of imagination of T-Mobile and their lack of engagement with the community, the residents of Waterford Squares and the neighboring areas that are affected by this. But really taking so many weeks to come back with 15 inches more of space, I don't know. You're the judges of beauty and balance and lifestyle, but this sounds to me like a pretty lame exercise of design and imagination. So I'm not going to harp on the visual impact and the difference in materials, or all my predecessors have talked about that. But I want to make a comment about the purview of the DRB. So I completely understand, and I was warned many times, that I shouldn't speak about radiation, but you do deal with radiation. You deal with visual electromagnetic radiation that we call light. When you have construction or any development that uses unreasonable lighting, very extreme, incompatible colors, or intensities of light that might bother the neighbors, you feel compelled to act. In this case, we cannot see it with our eyes, but we can feel it in our health, in our body, and everything. My daughter, who's 2 years old, happens to be sleeping 15 feet below some monstrosity called some sigma or alpha or beta or some very creative Greek letter. So it does impact. I'm not suggesting that you judge just based on this, but I'm suggesting that in the future, the DRB might consider expanding a little bit your scope into some forms of electromagnetic spectrum that are not visible but might be harming.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you
and
for
again,
coming.
thank you all for your service in keeping Reston beautiful.
Good. Anyone else? Yes? Oh, okay, next.
My name is Estelle Gutman, and I have lived in beautiful Waterford Square for almost 16 years. And since this new T-Mobile proposal has only very insignificant changes to the original proposal. So my comments now are virtually the same as they were in April because they still apply. My husband was an architect in Manhattan, where he created plans to restore, renovate, and repurpose countless old buildings. Also, he was an arbitrator in construction disputes with the American Arbitration Association. It was my job to sit down with plan examiners in the Department of Building, and because the buildings were old, often I had to negotiate common sense adaptations to code to obtain approval of the plans. So after almost 30 years of working with my husband and plan examiners, and even an occasional lawyer, I strongly believe that adding anything to a building that does not enhance it, especially a beautiful building like this, but in fact will detract from it, is simply unconscionable and just plain wrong. T-Mobile's proposal certainly would detract from the beautiful appearance of this building. You saw what it looked like with all these things on the top. So as residents, we're still David fighting Goliath, but we request and we even trust that you, the Reston Design Review Board, who care so much about the appearance of our community, will again support us and again deny T-Mobile's application. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Daphne Holmquist. I've lived in Waterford Square, I think, since '96. It was built in '82. And I was a realtor for 36 years, so I'm very conscious of buildings and looks and that sort of thing. Waterford Square sits on one of the loveliest streets in Reston. The architecture of the building and the neighborhood in general is mid-century modern with strong influences from Frank Lloyd Wright. The dwellings are intended to blend into their natural surroundings and create a beautiful, balanced environment. Hook Road Park provides recreational fields and much green space for relaxing. This balance is as Robert Simon intended when he designed our beautiful community more than 50 years ago. The installation of the cellular antennas is disruptive to the design of our building and our community. The proposed cellular structures will rise well above the roof line of the six-story Waterford Square, Waterford Square, and be enclosed by industrial-grade plastic that is not anywhere near the high-quality solid brick exterior of the building. Further, the number of towers is concerning us all, as corners of the building will be affected. These are not some low-key, semi-hidden fixtures, but multiple eyesores from every angle. They will ruin the roof line and run counter to the residential and recreational purposes of our neighborhood. The rooftop of 11500 Fairway Drive was not designed to be an antenna farm. It houses HVAC units, chimney vents, and essential infrastructure for the building, which are barely visible from the street. The proposed installation runs contrary to that purpose because it will result in highly visible structures that do not conform to the design of the rest of the building. The change in T-Mobile's design is not substantially different from their previous application, which this board denied. The proposed antennas still present an eyesore and should not be approved. Part of Bob Simon's concept for Reston is that our community would strike the right balance between live, work, and play. People could grow, be educated, have their careers, and retire in the same place. His design envisioned residential, commercial, recreational, and mixed-use areas planned in a balanced way. The installation of the cell antennas on the Waterford Square roof upsets that balance. There are many taller commercial buildings available in Reston for the purposes of erecting cellular antenna installations. I am sure they are far better candidates for this type of project than a small residential building on a quiet street in an historic part of Reston. Based on the above, I respectfully request the DRP to reject the site application once again and to discourage T-Mobile from reapplying.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Is there anyone else with a new message? Yes, there is.
I'm Janet Markin,
Hello, Janet.
and my 3-year-old friend in our building on my floor is still my friend, and she's my first concern. I'm also concerned for the rest of us in the building. We purchased before the building was finished, so I've been there since 1982. Anything done to this building, I have friends from all over the world who have visited me and walked in here and went, "Oh, what a beautiful building." Anything done to it, and I'm an artist, it's going to ruin the building look. And I don't think that's going to be the right thing to do. Besides which, that the concern of the health in the building is very strong in me, and I wish everyone would really, really think twice about this, because it's inconclusive to what can happen or not happen. But that the looks will definitely go downhill, I'm almost positive about that. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we got time for a couple more. Come on up.
Hello, dear distinguished board members. My name is Katrin Shoemaker, and I don't want to repeat what I said last time because my concerns are the same about radiation, etc. I just want to mention that my husband is, along with other members, part of the Reston Hook Road Working Group, and they spent nearly 1 year seeking to improve both aspects, aesthetic aspects, as well as the safety aspects of our Hook Road Park. And this proposal by the T-Mobile contradicts the goal of the Hook Road Working Group. The antennas covered by turned-like structures will look like a castle, but like an ugly one. And I'm originally from Germany, and we have plenty of castles, you know, and I know how a beautiful one looks like, but the one from T-Mobile proposed definitely doesn't fit into that category. So, like I said, I don't want to repeat myself about the radiation, everything, which is a big, big concern for our community, our house, our friends, my family. And for that reason, I would like to request the denial of the T-Mobile application. And thank you for your time and thank you for your work. Thank you.
Thank you.
I hate to break up the Waterford Square block, but I'm Elmer Dannenberger, president of Sunderbriar Cluster Association. We're neighbors to Waterford Square. And I had shortened my remarks by about 75% before we came. I've shortened them by another 75, so I'll be very brief. One thing is striking to us as neighbors is the complete absence of support for this proposal by the nominal applicants, Waterford Square Condominium Association. It seems bizarre to us. I'm going to forego my comments on the procedural aspects of this, and there are a number of issues procedurally, and just simply urge T-Mobile to be a good corporate citizen and accept the will of the overwhelming majority of the residents of the building and the rest of the community. We're at Sunderbriar 100% behind our neighbors. Our board passed a resolution before your last meeting unanimously, so we're fully opposed to this project. Just a couple more points to emphasis. Waterford Square is the most visible and architecturally significant building in our neighborhood. Again, it's only 6 stories high, so we see it. I look out the 3rd floor of our townhouse, which is where I spend a lot of time because I work at home. And I look to the south, and I see the treetops and the upper stories of that condominium building. I don't think I'm being presumptuous in saying that the building's architects would be appalled by this proposal. If they had wanted a castle-like structure with turrets, they would have designed the building as such. And I'll just leave it at that and urge denial of this project. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Ann Strange, I'm president of Townsend Waterford Cluster, and I'd like for my residents to stand up so they can see our cluster is here. First off, we're sort of aggravated that 6 months later, we're back doing the same thing that we thought we had defeated or had you disapproved 6 months ago. So ditto to everything that everybody else says. Now, we are the ones who have to look at it. It might be on the top of their building, but it's from our houses that we get to see that cheap, plastic, ugly stuff. We don't want it. We don't like it. We didn't like it in April. They've made some little teeny tiny adjustments. We still don't like it. So we are asking you not to approve this. But more importantly, it is my understanding that the condo board has signed a 30-year contract with T-Mobile. So does this mean that every 6 months, as they try to make changes, we're going to be back over here asking you and telling you we don't want this in our community? So what is it going to take to put this to bed once and for all so we don't have to come back here?
Good evening. My name is Andrea Tui, and I'm not a resident of the Waterford. I'm a resident of Lakeside Cluster, which is just down the road from them. My husband and I live at Lakeside Cluster. I grew up in the Lake Ann area for a good portion of my childhood and the majority of my adulthood. We choose to live in Reston because it is a wonderful place, and Reston's residents pay to live here because of its beauty, vibrancy, and diversity. We also make a commitment to follow the design rules and preserve the essence of Reston. Change is good and welcome when appropriate, as is evident in the urbanization and growth taking place around us. Living in the Hook Road neighborhood, we can enjoy Old Reston and walk to Lake Ann Plaza, and new urban Reston and walk to Reston Town Center, Plaza America. And I'm an urban girl. I mention this because I want to stress that the Waterford condo and our Lake Ann neighborhood is not a suitable venue for the development proposed by the T-Mobile cell towers. My concern is twofold. Very briefly, of course, the health risks, and I won't go into that. I do have a very sweet niece and nephews who use Hook Road regularly and live in Bakken Court, adjacent to the Waterford. In addition to the health risks, cell towers on top of a residential condo building surrounded lovely homes in the historic Lake Ann area is not what I consider an appropriate representation of Reston. Is this really a reflection of the aesthetics of our community? The Fairway Drive Hook Road neighbors live in condos, townhouses, single-family homes, old and newer. My home is from the early 60s. We are paying to live in this neighborhood and abiding by our cluster and RA rules. I would not want or condone a cell antenna on my house, and the residents of Waterford should not have to tolerate cell towers on the roof of their home. I humbly ask and urge the Design Review Board to put this matter to rest and to uphold the previous ruling regarding the T-Mobile request. The obligation is to the residents of the Waterford and their neighbors and the neighborhood, not to T-Mobile. Thank you.
Anybody else? Got two, okay, two more.
Hi guys. So I came just from work, that's why I'm dressed like this, but I live with my mom in Bakken Court, and I've always wanted to paint my door, but you guys won't let me paint it a certain shade of blue. So I was just wondering why I can't paint it a certain shade of blue, but they can put some big towers where I look out my window. That's it.
I'm Mary Balboni. I spoke here last time too. I'm an interested party. I've been in Reston over 33 years. I live on the Sunderbriar cluster, which is both Bakken Court and Sunder Court, which are adjacent to this town, beautiful building. And I've stayed in Reston, and my mother lived in my townhouse for a while, and we also own a large single-family home in Reston as well. I feel like I have a big commitment to this beautiful place. You know, I would hope we continue to do that with these board decisions. Everything everyone said before, I'm just going to say ditto, except for this one additional thing they brought as evidence, which I think we should just sort of throw out the window. They pointed out that there is a Sprint tower down in the Lake Ann area on the tall, I forget what that building is, where
Heron House.
The Farron House, and where Robert E. Simon lived. But the whole point of that is that, yes, there's residents in that, but everything around there is commercial. There's restaurants, there's bookstores, there's this and that. And there's nothing commercial around our place, right there. And my place at the townhouses or Waterford Cluster or the baseball fields, I don't see anything commercial there. And if the ARB already approved something that is around a large commercial community, then why don't you go put your T-Mobile thing next to the Sprint? I mean, apparently RF can't cross each other. You know, you'll get the same signals. I don't understand why we are being pushed to put this in our residential area. You know, and people are worried about I don't know if RF can really hurt anybody, but I know when we put RF signals out I work for Raytheon, out in the communities that are in the Middle East, we do not put them right next to the soldiers' what do you call those? Shelters. Barracks, or even shelters. We have them out in these mobile shelters. We do not put our RF things, our microwaves, we don't put them near people out there. And it's in Iraq and Iran and Afghanistan. So why, if we don't do it in Afghanistan, why are we doing it in America, right here next to our homes? So I really hope you can reject this, keeping in mind that we are not commercial. And if we already have approval for down at Lake Ann, go approve it there. That's all I'm trying to ask and request the board. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So wrap up, okay.
So I was here 6 months ago, and I'm back tonight. My name is Bruce Black.
Can you move a little closer to the mic? I can't hear you.
Sorry. I was here 6 months ago, and I'm here again tonight. I'd rather not be here tonight, but I am because this situation is continuing. I'm a resident of Waterford Square with my mother. We live in 604, which is directly underneath the Gamma Quadrant, which in addition to having 3 antennas is targeted to have the microwave link as well, which we really don't like. I had a bunch of stuff I was going to say. Most of it's been addressed, so I will skip it and just get to the few points that I don't think have been addressed. One of the things I wanted to mention, 6 months ago, the board itself summed up the situation when it denied the request. They said it was not in keeping with the clean, modern design of the building. I don't believe the redesign from T-Mobile has made any change. It's still not in keeping with the clean, modern design of the building. I think it's interesting that when the board asked T-Mobile what they could do to mitigate, at the time they said we can pull it back a foot, but we'd have to raise it a foot. So now they suddenly have figured out, oh, well, maybe that's not the case. Maybe we can do a little more. Well, why couldn't they have brought that up back then? So with that in mind, maybe there are other things they can do, including not doing it at all, which hopefully is the best thing to do. I still take, I'm very concerned with the way they refer to the antenna boxes as stealth. There's nothing stealthy about them. I believe, like everybody else has mentioned, they look more like battlements, crenellations, or turrets. It's going to make our building look like something out of Escape from New York, which I really don't want to see. I still have concerns about the, I know we don't want to talk about radiation, but they haven't said what the antennas are going to put out. By my calculations, we're looking at about 2,000 watts. That's going to be a few feet above my head, my mother's head. Everybody else on the 6th floor is going to share that. I don't think they want that either. The one last thing T-Mobile mentioned when they were talking to you last time, they said, oh, well, you know, we've got some antennas at South Lakes. Well, that's great. If you can put them in South Lakes, guys, there's a school right up the street and there's a church right up the street. Perhaps you should talk to them about putting antenna masts there as opposed to putting them over our head. We're going to be there 24 hours a day. School, they're not going to be there 24 hours a day. Church, they're not going to be there 24 hours a day. So perhaps you should consider that. And with that, I hope you will deny this again. I hope with the new board, the board that we get now will decide to take T-Mobile to court if we have to break this nightmare, because I don't want to be back here another 6 months from now, another year from now, another 2 years. We need to end this. In my opinion, there's nothing they can do that will change the design on this building to make it acceptable. So thank you.
Okay. What I think we ought to do now, I'm going to give the applicant a chance to respond to some of your comments, and then we're going to close that part of it, and we'll let the board discuss what we've heard and where we are and come to some sort of decision, okay? So, gentlemen?
Mr. Chairman, very briefly, just a couple of things I want to address and try to respond. First of all, this is a rather large roof, which poses some challenges, and I talked about it at the outset. The antennas really are challenged by the size of the roof and also the parapet. There's a parapet, the existing condition, 3-foot 9-inch parapet around the building. So part of the reason for the height of the stealth enclosure and the installation is to overcome that parapet wall. There's a shadowing effect when the signal comes off of a large rooftop like that. So we have that as an existing condition. And I forgot to mention that at the outset. Earlier on, there was a suggestion that solar panels might be appropriate for this roof. I see no reason why solar panels and antenna can't coexist on a roof, particularly a roof as large as this one. I know of other installations where we have both cell antennas and solar panels, and I see no challenge with that. I think there was some confusion, maybe I caused the confusion, I don't know, but the reason for the proposal is to replace the antennas on the existing Lake Ann Fellowship app. Those have been there a long time. T-Mobile's up there, as is AT&T, Verizon, and I believe Sprint as well. So with the changes, with the renovation going on at Lake Ann, we are all forced to try to find a place to put antennas on the roof. Obviously, Lake Ann Fellowship House is itself a residential facility. The reason I put the Heron House up there, and I see that it's still up there, is because we wanted to show you another stealth installation on a rooftop on a residential building. Not to suggest that this might be an alternative to Waterford. It's simply another installation not too far away. Just recently, we heard about South Lakes High School. I guess maybe I caused the confusion there as well. South Lakes has 2 cell monopoles on the football stadium, and there are 5 carriers there, have been there for a long, long time. It doesn't do anything for the coverage needed in this particular vicinity, but it is an existing facility. As you may know, there are numerous Fairfax County schools with monopoles on stadium light poles. That's a different story. Lastly, Mr. Chairman, the question about the setback of on the roof, and I went through the numbers at the outset, but we're between 1 foot 8 inches and 4 foot in the redesign. What really happened there was we went to a smaller antenna size. It's a 6-foot antenna as opposed to the 8-foot antenna, which was in the original design. That's a compromise, and we had to work hard with the engineers to get them to a slightly smaller antenna. But that's what allowed us some flexibility in terms of moving back and reducing the height of the concealment wall. So that perhaps came where some of the confusion came from. I'm not going to address the RF emissions issues. We are in full compliance with the federal guidelines, as we are on the thousands of sites throughout the state of Virginia. And as I said, that's an issue that's been preempted by the Fed since 1996, so it's really not a planning commission or DRB matter. But that's really all I had, Mr. Chairman, unless you have questions for me.
Okay, good, thank you. Okay, let's keep it on this side of the table for a while now. Let's have comments from the board. Jason, let's start with you.
I don't have anything to start.
Okay, let's jump to the other side. Grace.
I don't have anything new to add. I appreciate the revision to the setbacks and the height, but I still see that it's visible and it does detract from the architecture and the roof line. So I don't see any change there.
Okay. Charlie?
Well, I have a new concern that I didn't until he brought it up. If AT&T and T-Mobile are also having to move, I'm concerned that if we open this up, they're going to want to jump on the next residential building. I don't know where they're going or what they're, we haven't heard from them. But that's another concern, that we are opening up a trend here. We're setting a precedent if we're not careful.
Nick?
I think my comments regarding the design is that, if you were in here with this as a brand new proposal for a new building, and you showed this to me with this elevation, and I asked you to explain, well, why are these towers here? What is the architectural relationship of those towers to the building? If you were presenting that to me for just design review standpoint.
I'm not an architect. I probably wouldn't answer that question.
So I think maybe that's what we're struggling with too, is from a design standpoint, I haven't heard a good justification of why this is a meaningful addition to this building. So that's kind of the biggest thing that stands out in my mind right now, apart from all the contractual or safety issues, whatever those are. That's my hang up right now. And regarding Heron House, I appreciate you bringing that in as an example. I think the difference though is the way that architecture is currently. It lends itself to that retrofit on top of there given the way the top of that roof looks, but when you're comparing it to Waterford and the lines that presents and what it's trying to convey, I just don't think it's a apples to apples comparison on that, so.
So I mentioned that Heron House came with suggestions, planning commission. We operate under the guidelines put out by DPZ, by Fairfax County. So when we're asked to do a design, we have to look at the 2232 and the guidelines that the county puts out.
Right.
And through those discussions, the Heron House came up as an example.
I think it's a great approach, and I want to thank you for sharing that with us to give a second set of opinion to it, but I don't think it's not a plug and play for your case, unfortunately, in my mind.
Understood.
Ken?
Yeah, I think you're here with the DRB, and we're the governing entity with regard to this decision. So I appreciate you bringing the Heron House to our attention, but you still have to get DRB approval here for this situation. I don't see any changes. I still see a lot of attempted visible concealment. And I think if you read our guidelines, the intent is to do your best to conceal, if not bring it back towards any existing facilities on the roof. And if you look at the sight lines, you can't even see their maintenance components on the roof. And so it doesn't even adhere to any of the guidelines that we've asked you to review. So just as you proposed the last time, I see nothing different here. They're still extremely visible. They don't do anything for the architecture of the building. They detract from it. And they don't adhere to any of the guidelines that we suggest in terms of trying to conceal something like this. So I'm not in favor of this.
Okay. I guess I agree with all my other associates up here that I really, an inch here and a foot there don't really make a whole lot of difference in this particular application. I think the comparisons to Fellowship House and Heron House, I think some of the comments we made last time were, this is not truly low rise, but it's 5 or 6 stories. Heron House is 14 plus. And I think there's a big difference there between putting something 14 floors up as opposed to 5 stories up. The other comments you've heard before about the current architecture of this building and what it's going to do to this building, I don't need to repeat all of that. I think it becomes sort of a precedent setter, which worries me almost as much as anything else, that if that's, we don't want to start putting things like this on top of 4 and 5 and 6 story buildings. Fellowship House, we're also working with them. The existing building's going to be there for another 2 or 3 years, so that gives you some time to find another location. And maybe longer, depending on what happens with the county. So I guess I agree with particularly what Ken, well, with what everybody says. Nothing's different, nothing's changed. I implore you not to come back with a design that's moved 6 more inches one way or the other. It's not going to, in my mind, we haven't voted yet, but I don't think it'll get approved. And I think, I'm sorry, but I think we've kind of wasted a lot of people's time tonight. And I'm sorry for that, and I'm sorry. I think it was clear in April, this kind of design is not going to get approved by this board. And it's the same design. And it's almost embarrassing to be sitting here saying the same thing again. And I don't want to 6 months from now be saying the same thing again. So that said, I'll make a motion to disapprove the current application and the suggested mild relocation of these rooftop units.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor, let's raise your hands so we get an accurate count. Looks like it's unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Hey, everybody, we have more meeting we got to do. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay, next on the agenda tonight. All right, the next operational item we have this evening is the 2019 calendar. I've already memorized it.
I've already
Did you
loaded
have a
it.
chance to look at it yet? No?
Yeah, I got it
Yes,
right here.
as usual, I mean, we do this early so that we can set aside those dates for the meeting space, bottom line.
Yeah.
You know, we'll remain flexible and find substitutions when we need to, but, yeah.
I've already loaded it in my Google Calendar. We're stuck with it.
Oh, good,
Yeah.
okay. So we just need a motion to approve the calendar for 2019, and we'll be good to go.
I move to approve calendar 2018.
I'll second it.
Okay?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. DRB resolution edits. Anna, is that you?
Yes, and I can tell you this is going to be very simple. So I'm not going to ask you to change language with the resolution. So this is really something that we're doing with several of our resolutions, where we're trying to detach forms from the actual resolution. So resolution 8 has the DRB application attached to the resolution. So if we need to make any minor change to the application, it has to go through the whole resolution process to go through the board. And we want to avoid that, so we're just asking your approval to have the application attached to the resolution. We'll still have to take that to the board, but then once we do that, then that will just be an administrative process in order to.
I don't think, does anybody have a problem with that?
Does the application become an appendice essentially, or?
But right now it is, but once we detach it, it just becomes a form.
Okay.
So you need a motion to redact it, is that what you said?
We need a motion to
Separate.
detach it, separate it from the resolution.
Okay, I'll make a motion to separate it from the resolution.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Thank you.
Detach it.
Point of order, it'd actually be a motion to amend the resolution to delete the attachment, because if you're separating it, it presumes that it's going to still exist. So you want to amend the resolution, so the resolution is just the resolution.
We'll correct the motion to whatever he said.
I'll second it again. I got it, I'll second
You
it
got
again.
it. All those in favor?
Aye.
I would like to bring up something for future. I know it's, we have two issues. We have quite a few instances where one neighbor has not been notified, and in some cases, said neighbor is somebody people don't particularly want to deal with. I think that we need to revise the notification that you need the signature of an abutting, but that somehow you have to have shown that you've notified another neighbor, whether you send them a certified letter or something, that there has to be a formal document saying that you have notified both parties on each side of your property. Because we have one coming up that, you know, the person wasn't notified and they're not happy. And I don't know how we would revise the current document to say, you know, that they have to be notified somehow, sign the form.
Both
or send
adjacent
them-
neighbors.
Both adjacent neighbors need to be.
Sharing the property lines. on both
Correct,
sides.
need to be notified. Even if you don't want to go for a signature, show that you've sent a certified letter or something.
We can look into that.
I'd say
I think it's a
contiguous.
design guideline, we can put it into the design guidelines too, for certain elements. And are you talking about the deck scenario?
Well, the deck is one that's coming very soon, but we've got one before covenants, which has nothing to do with this, but it happens to be a neighbor that's controversial, and that nobody will go to them for signature because they don't want to go to them.
But that's in the resolution now, that if you don't want to go and get a signature, you notify them by certified mail.
But you're not required to?
You're not required to if you get the signature, but if you don't want to go and obtain the signature as an alternative, you send them notification
But-
via certified mail.
But the abutting
It
neighbors.
currently doesn't say
both.
both neighbors,
We just
is
require
my
to get
point.
one.
It should be both adjoining neighbors.
But I think it's, the deed is what outlines who gets notified. But
Well, it's required in the deed to get one adjacent lot owner. So if we did something other than that, it would be more of a procedural change. So could we do something like that within the design guideline?
No,
We couldn't.
If the deed says that it's one, it's one.
It's
You
one.
can't have a resolution or design guideline that contravenes our highest document. Or
So what would it require to get, I mean, it'd be a year from now before it happened. I understand, we just made a change that took a year.
Probably I'm gonna have to get back to you on that, as to how we can.
Well, it just seems to be one controversy that there ought to be a way to end. If people have been notified, that would end that controversy.
Well, why don't we refer it to council and give you, 12 months to figure it out?
Yeah, well, that's what
I'm
it
feeling
takes.
generous, 6. Council was so referred.
Okay, and one other thought is, and I know that wouldn't be well received, a great portion of our complaints are because people are asking for forgiveness. They've already done the work, they're coming asking for forgiveness. I think that since it's a burden on us, there should be some financial penalty for going ahead and doing the work and then coming to the board. With the board having the ability to waive it if there's extenuating circumstances. But,
it's the same amount of work.
right, but
If they come to you in the proper way. So now you're talking about
a
imposing
a proposed penalty for not following the rules. Absolutely, although that's not the politically correct way to put it.
At the discretion of the board.
Yeah, I mean, there are instances where things happen that certainly, or there's a financial, financial
I
consideration.
think I don't disagree with what you're saying, but I think it puts us into more of a policing action that I don't think we want to be in. It's enough that they come here and,
Generally, I think you'd be exceeding your authority.
Yeah.
Your job is to promulgate and administer the design guidelines. The board of directors is tasked with enforcing your decisions. So the proper venue to penalize someone would probably be through legal committee or something like that.
yeah.
Right,
And so it would not be something that would
Right.
fall to the DRB to take them to task for failure to comply.
And that's already in place, so.
Right. Well, we just seem to need to do a better job of getting the word out to people that you need to come to the board first and not after the fact.
Yeah,
I
we've been
don't-
trying to do that
We've
for
been
20
working on
years.
that for 20 years, I know,
Really.
but that's all I had.
Okay. Anybody else got an axe they need grinding? Yes, sir.
I know it's not really my place, but
Sure.
in the last panel meeting, one of the homeowners had an issue with a forged signature, and I don't know what the case is or if that's true, but one thing they requested was a date box on the signatures, which we don't have.
We do on the new one.
On the new one, okay, well, never mind then, I'll be quiet
Was
and
it, was
just
a date
sit
box,
here.
is that what you said?
Yeah,
Oh.
the current application doesn't have a place where you put your date when you signed it, so the new application will have that.
That's fine.
And
Good
a lot of
catch.
other things.
Okay, anything else? I need a motion to adjourn?
I so move.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Good meeting, everybody. Thank you
Well
all.
done.
What time is it?
It's 8:35.
8:35.